I remember 3 years ago, in 1969, in 2019, when I turned 50, it struck me as the biggest story of my lifetime that there was less than half as much animal life on Earth at that point than when I was born. In just 50 years, the fact that humanity has managed to do that to the planet, on the one hand, it's existentially depressing, but on the other hand, you have to think it's going to have a snapback function on the human beings and the economy that we rely on. And of course, that's what we're now seeing. We are seeing that as the world is converting so much land for productive use for human beings, that nature is being short-term productive use for human beings, that nature is being squeezed into tiny corners. And what that means is that biodiversity is increasingly understood to be material for businesses and for the investors that rely on them. And so that's why biodiversity is increasingly seen as an economic and financial issue. Half of the world's GDP, so roughly $44 trillion, is generated through sectors that are understood clearly to be either moderately or highly dependent on nature. Okay, this is not the digital world by itself. And the consequences are very clear for businesses across the entire supply chain. Production costs are going to increase, profitability is going to drop, prices are going to have to go up for end consumers. Inflation is going to go up. And we've been talking a lot because of TAC and I co-chairing this about the Asia Pacific region. Actually, those numbers are higher for Asia Pacific. Some 63% of the region's GDP, almost 20 trillion, is directly at risk from biodiversity loss. And there are really three types of risks to companies out there: physical, transition, and then systemic. The physical risks are fairly straightforward. They're the direct result of a company's dependencies on biodiversity that result in disrupted supply chains and input scarcity. Then you've got transition risks that occur more broadly when companies don't understand how quickly the world is changing and social views are changing, which will cause brand damage, reputational risk, stranded assets, you name it. And then finally, and most concerningly, of course, you have systemic risks, which occur when events like the sixth mass extinction cause the entire system to break down. And then you get large-scale disruption and social crises that companies are not prepared for. And all of this is why companies or investors are in Montreal this week attending the UN Biodiversity Summit. It's going to wrap up next week. It's by far the largest biodiversity COP in history. It's got 20,000 participants. The last only had 4,000. And I think that you can see that this interest can be explained by the momentum to bring the private sector target that's being negotiated at the Montreal COP right now. It's target 15 in the draft agreement. If it's adopted, and I think we all on the call here really hope it is, it's going to force businesses to disclose their biodiversity impacts and the dependencies across their supply chain. And the point here is very simple. Just like with climate change more broadly, just like with carbon and methane in the atmosphere, you can't fix a problem, you can't start to address a problem unless first you measure it. And that's where we are with the impact of biodiversity on the planet. That's where we are with the impact of biodiversity on corporations and the global economy. So it is an important, it's a tipping point really for response to biodiversity when the world has already hit the tipping point for the global economy.